This was day 3 at Forrester B2B Summit. My name is Jim Kohl. I'm Executive Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Fathom. We're a digital marketing firm based in Cleveland, Ohio. And I am joined by Angela Krieger. Angela, you are our Vice President of Strategy. Tell us a little bit about your focus for your team and how you interact with clients today.
Thanks, Jim. In terms of the focus of our strategy team here at Fathom, really looking to bridge that chasm between business goals and overall business strategy and how we activate that from a go-to-market perspective. So oftentimes we find clients are missing that gap in terms of how do I translate this to how I go to market in paid social or programmatic or from a marketing automation standpoint. My team is really focused on how are we bridging that gap? What's the overall strategy that we're bringing to clients? What's the insight that we're bringing on market position, competitors, our audience, what value props they have, and how we think about messaging and motivating those different audiences to move them through to outcomes that really drive ROI for the businesses that our clients serve.
Okay, so Forrester B2B Summit, day 3, here we are. We started off the day with, again, a keynote from Forrester analyst and group directors. In this case, it was Ian Bruce, Building Trust, the B2B Imperative. Some of the key ideas they really brought forward were this. Number one, that trust is critical for B2B marketers, and that trust is in significant decline. There is this large gap between how businesses perceive themselves and how people see those businesses. So, for example, just two pieces of data that sort of stand in contrast. When businesses perceive themselves sort of in the context of trust, 92% indicate we are honest and ethical. And depending on sector, 57% of people outside of those businesses would say the same thing. So there's a big gap between 57% and 92%. I think the takeaway being that we tend to give ourselves a lot more grace when we think about ourselves being trustworthy as opposed to how we view others and view businesses. So what was a takeaway that you had from this first keynote?
Yeah, I mean, I think that part's really interesting, Jim. In working together, something that I hear you say often even is, are we thinking about this too internally versus externally? And that came up in that session for me in terms of how important it really is to have that external perspective when we're thinking about our strategies or our messaging or how we're going to market with an audience. But something that I've always had in terms of a perspective in the back of my mind, one of my early mentors early in my career had said, people don't trust brands, people trust people. So how do you think about, personifying your brand or like building that, like a true relationship? And I think a lot of times we think of business to business as too transactional, and it's business to business. We're all in business. We get it. And thinking back to sessions earlier this week where we don't give enough credit that it is a really emotional decision for most individuals who are making that business buying decision, and that they're buying on emotion and then using logic to justify that later. So building that trust kind of plays into that. How are you thinking person to person, and what's motivating that individual? What's a barrier that they're having in their business or the work that they're doing? What solution are they looking for? And how are you not just asking for something for them, but giving something to them to build that trust within your brand?
I think that's something we hear a lot, that businesses and brands in particular need to build a foundation of trust, or obviously that's at the heart of sort of brand health and brand equity. What are you known for in the market? What do you want to be known for? Can you deliver on the promises that you're making? But your point being that people are really more central to that element of building trust than the business or the brand itself.
Correct. I think if you think of your, a relationship that you have, like maybe with like one of our vendors or our partners, I often don't think of, oh, Google helps me do this. I think of, oh, Chris and Stephanie help me do this. And like, that's where I'm putting my weight in, our Google partnership sometimes in Chris and Steph. So that's my perception and perspective, and I don't think that we give that enough credit as B2B marketers often.
That's a great point. I was on LinkedIn real briefly today, and I just noticed that someone that I work with at a current partner or vendor of ours, his name is Leighton, has moved on to Salesforce. And I literally said to a colleague who was in the room with me at the time, oh my goodness, Leighton moved on. And not to take anything away from that firm that he was with, but it is a different situation now. Leighton, for me, was sort of the lifeblood of our relationship with that organization. And without him, they have like a steeper hill to climb now. They also brought forward the levers of trust: accountability, competence, consistency, dependability, empathy, integrity, and transparency. All very good ideas, but all of these are the building blocks or the levers of trust. And they presented this idea that you need to push and pull on those different levers at different points, depending on your business model, depending on the channels that you're operating in. And I think that connects really nicely with the idea that you are highlighting, which is if people are sort of the builders of trust for a brand or an organization, then these 7 levers of trust give a lot of different people across a lot of different roles the ability to push and pull on them at the right time to build trust. I started off this session thinking this is a session for brand marketers, that this is primarily about how do you help build equity around your brand and build trust in the market. And I left the session thinking about these 7 levers, understanding that it's not just the brand marketer who needs to be concerned with this. I think they did a nice job of bringing forward some really compelling content around trust and giving everybody beyond brand marketers something to think about.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think, to your point, as we're first engaging with a customer or a potential customer, what creates trust with them is different. And we're going to pull on different levers there. We might not have, a lot in terms of like accountability there because, we're not servicing them yet. So maybe that's not a lever that we pull, but maybe we pull like a high empathy lever in terms of like, okay, this is the challenge that they're running into. That's very different than, someone who's giving you a verbal and how you are delivering on that from a marketing perspective or how you're servicing that account. But it really is everyone in your system that's building that trust. And if you don't have your full org aligned to those values, then that trust is going to break down with your customers.
This session, the keynote at the beginning of the day, was in many ways the high point for me personally. I found the content very interesting, very intriguing, and it sort of primed me for what I thought was going to be a great rest of the day. What immediately followed was Murphy's Law.
Yeah.
Because as soon as we talked about establishing trust, delivering on trust, ideas of dependability, consistency, at a virtual event where you've got 3,000 attendees, the virtual platform essentially came to a screeching halt, and all of this content and our points of access just completely failed. It was not isolated to us. It was system-wide. And so that was an interesting lesson in trust when we talked about that for day 3 at the summit, and then boom, this technical issue happens, and they can't deliver on the promise they made. So how do you think Forrester handled that live in the moment? And I guess what are some of your takeaways from that experience?
As I think about, typically when I'm at a conference, Twitter is kind of like your guiding post in terms of, okay, there's not something in the platform. I'm not receiving messaging here. I'm going to go follow the hashtag on Twitter. Was a bit disappointed to not see communication from Forrester in that light, just knowing that this is virtual. We're not pushing notifications out to people that we're experiencing technical difficulties. And they've been really great at pushing notifications within the platform throughout the rest of the conference. So kind of seeing that lack of communication after such an impactful trust session, I'm like, I had just built up so much trust. And now, it definitely definitely took a few pennies out of my trust jar with Forrester. But I think, a better way to handle that would be we're experiencing technical difficulties. And that's something that's hard in social. I mean, that early on in my career, I spent a lot of time in social, in PR, and managing mini and major crises. I think being transparent is really important. We're experiencing a glitch. We don't know what's happening and when we'll be back up. We will keep you informed. Then I know, okay, someone's on it. They're handling it. I've made an investment in this conference and someone's looking into why I can't access the information that I'm looking for.
Not to pile on to Forrester, it's a tough gig. It's a tough day to run a virtual event, but all very interesting given the topic that we started the day off with. Okay, let's move on. We moved on to some other sessions. Where would you like to go next?
Something that really stuck out to me in terms of how you're planning a strategy and thinking about how your route to market is that it's a team sport. You have a driver, so someone who is focused on, here's how I'm going to drive through the outlined plan. Am I maximizing this in the way that I can? Do I have my pedal to the metal going as fast as I can? The spotter who's spotting those roadblocks. So they could have had a spotter today who could have spot that roadblock of technical difficulties. And then the navigator who's planning that carefully planned route. The navigator alternatively could have said, okay, if we have a technical glitch and this goes down, what's our plan for that? How are we communicating? And that's a way that we could be more successful. So I think that kind of really dives right into different principle in terms of a route to market a bit, but definitely a way that you could have applied it in this instance.
Okay, so on the routes to market session, this is not your go-to-market strategy. Your go-to-market strategy is actually an input into what they term the route to market. And your route to market is really more of, as they term it, a means to strategic advantage. And there are more than 1, 2, or 3 paths to the same destination. And so planning your journey or your route to market is an important element and can be a means of strategic and competitive advantage if you plan accordingly. I thought it was interesting that they used Cannonball Run. Had you been familiar with the Cannonball Run?
I hadn't been, so this was new to me today.
I think it was actually one of the best analogies or metaphors. Almost every session has an analogy that it's built on. This one is, as I mentioned, based on Cannonball Run. The Cannonball Run is a race from coast to coast. And so it's obviously unofficial because it is illegal. And it's a race whereby everyone sort of outfits their own car. It starts on the West Coast in California. And the first to get to New York on the coast is the winner. Average speeds are like 110 to 120 miles an hour because to win the race, you need to do this in about 24 hours or less. Really interesting, and they sort of brought forward all of these different roles that you mentioned on the Cannonball Run and likened it to how might you determine your route to market. So can what did you take away, or what are some points of emphasis from that analogy as it relates to B2B marketing that someone might consider?
Yeah. So as I think about that analogy, some of the things that stuck out were, okay, like, when do we think we're going to run out of gas? Like when do we need to go get gas? Am I going to, cut it close and revisit my route to market or my strategy or my assessment of performance too close to the cutoff, where I can't, if I run out of gas, then I'm stuck. It's putting me behind. I'm not going to win the race. I'm not going to get to where I need to go and meet those goals. So I think that was like a really good example in terms of what's pre-planned, like what construction might I run into. So where are areas in the market that might be experiencing some turmoil, or maybe those are areas that are seeing a lot of innovation and evolution right now. How do I make sure that I'm navigating, taking those areas a bit more slowly because it's a little bit of uncharted territory, and spending some knowing that I'm going to have to spend some time there. I'm going to have to learn there because it's new, it's different, it's evolving. I think that was like a huge takeaway for me, that I think sometimes as marketers, we're like, all right, let's bypass that. Let's get through that. Like we need to get through the construction, but it's like, okay, but like what might the construction be teaching us? They
talked about 4 steps that you would take to determining or developing your route to market. And it's, of course, using alliteration with the letter A. Those 4 steps are sort of to acknowledge that you need to determine the route to market, assess the options, analyze the progress, and then affirm your decisions along the way. Okay, so as we round out day 3 at Forrester B2B Summit, anything else come to mind in terms of key ideas you're walking away with, or any disappointments as you head into tomorrow, and hope that we can make good on them?
I wasn't exactly sure what to expect from a virtual conference. I'm like, how are they going to make this impactful? How are they going to keep people engaged? Obviously there's, trade-offs in anything virtual, but it's also nice in terms of, we've all been there where we've, hey, I think I really want to check out this session. I'm really intrigued on it. And either, this isn't what I thought it was, or, there's not the engagement that I'm looking for in this session. It's really nice to be able to, not have to duck out awkwardly, but just hop to another session and give it another 5 minutes. So I think that that's something that's been really nice. And Forrester has obviously built a wealth of content around this summit to support that for their attendees. So I think that that's something that they've done really well. I was really excited about the speed networking component of this conference. Mm-hmm. It's something that I'm not always really excited about because those like forced interactions aren't necessarily my jam all of the time. And there were definitely some weird prompts. Like, I don't know if, at a B2B summit talking to a stranger about, personal wellness habits I'm passionate about. It's like the right prompt to include there. I was like, that feels odd. So I initially was like, okay, like what's going on here? I'm not sure how I feel about this. I think they did a great job of kind of building upon a lot of their sessions day by day. It's felt, their storytelling through their sessions and engagement and how it all ties together has been, they've really done that content well. Maybe they'll figure out a better alternative to speed networking next time.
To wrap up the day, I think both in idea and in practice, we sort of heard a similar story, and that is trust is hard to build, easy to lose.
Yes.
We heard it, we lived it. Thank you, Angela.
Thanks, Jim.